Peter, let's start with what we can all see.
Mm-hmm.
You're wearing a bandana, and you tell a great story about how your kids on a family holiday in Cuba went into a bazaar and bought you a bandana some years ago.
This is the original one. It's actually got Che Guevara on the top.
Yeah, great.
We were just. I'm 51 years old, and I have a very wide part in my hair. You can see.
Yeah.
And we were on a sunny day in Havana, and my 14-year-old boy said, "Dad, I reckon you'd look great in that." I don't know. Look in the mirror. Geez, I think I do. My wife said, "Darling, you look fantastic." And my second son said, "Dad, that looks great." And my daughter said, "Daddy, that's great." And sadly, we're the only five that think so. but it doesn't matter. I mean, the thing about it, why I do it, I mean, you talk about older men. When I was playing rugby in France in the mid-80s, there was a guy called Daniel Herrero, Herrero. He coached Toulon, wasn't my coach, but I used to see a fair bit of him, and he was a guy that had big, bushy hair, a bit like sort of, not Ned Kelly, but sort of cross between Ned Kelly and Jesus. He had big beard, big hair, and he wore these big red braces, and he had this red thing around his head. And I think I used to look at him and thought, geez, when I'm 50, whatever, I think I'd not like to look like that, but I'd rather do my own thing. I sort of don't want to be like a corporate dickhead with a tie. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know what I mean? There's sort of a corporate uniform, and when I see people with ties, it doesn't feel, and I do wear ties occasionally, but it doesn't feel like me. Whereas for whatever reason, that feels like me, and I'm old, and I take a lot of flack for it, but I'm old enough to not care. I like it, and I'm old enough not to care that you don't.
One of the things that you also said was that if you're in a volatile situation, it makes you feel stronger.
Yeah, that's right. And that's an odd. I had a sort of a moment about a year ago now. I was the president, Northern Suburbs Basketball Association. So we had this late night meeting. Came out at 11 o'clock at night, and there were 6 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds at the bus stop, and they had a slightly threatening sort of menace about them. And I looked at them, there was a run like that, and I looked at them and thought, oh, I'm 51 years old, I'm still strong. I was sent off against the All Blacks, and I'm wearing a red bandana. I look like a prisoner on day leave trying to go straight. So I walked towards, okay, is there a problem, boys? They looked at me, big man, red bandana. No problem. And it was good. No, it does, it's a weird sort of thing.
But in a situation, okay, let's take that situation because that's really interesting from our perspective. What is your background in international level rugby means that you're not afraid of a physical confrontation?
No, not particularly. But if those boys, let's just say it had gone on with it. Let's say if they'd looked at me and they'd go, yeah, we do have a problem, I would have walked a mile out of my way not to have had a physical confrontation. So the best example I can offer, there was, when my now 18-year-old son was 1 year old, he was in the back. My wife, I'm driving. My wife's on my left. My son's behind me, and there was this dickhead, complete dickhead in a tow truck, going left and right, in and out of the lanes. And he was giving everybody, can we say shits? He was giving everybody the shits. Anyway, I got sick of it. I had a strong car, and as he tried to jam into my left, I rammed my car up as in back off. Anyway, he looked at it, and he backed off. And we stopped at the Sydney lights, the lights at Tempe, and they're 3-minute lights. Anyway, so I go, I've made this guy back off, and he's about 5 cars up, and I window down, gave him the victory wave. I shouldn't have done that. I should not have done that. I'd had the victory. I didn't need to dance on his grave. I'd humiliated him. Anyway, gotcha, you beauty. And then I see the doors opening, and this guy, and he's about 5'6" high, and he's about 5'6" wide, and he's about 5. He's a huge but squat man, big man. And he's coming out, walking towards me, and I thought, right, I've been sent off against the All Blacks. I'm a bit proud. I'm tragically proud of that. And so I thought, once he sees me, 6'6", 2 metres tall, once he sees me, he'll back off. Anyway, so I get out of the car. Yes, you got something to say? And he gets right up close to me, and right close. Yeah, okay. Well, this is, fucking, like that. And he was right in my face, and I put my finger in his chest, as in, mate, just back off a bit. And he said, press that button again. I said, what? He said, press that button again. What he was saying was, if you put your finger on my chest one more time, I'll go you. And I looked at it and I thought, I could take him. I could take this man down. However, if I had done that, he would have swung a punch at me, I would have swung a punch at him. We would have been on a Sydney street hitting each other. There would have been blood, there would have been police, there would have been one or other of us in hospital, all in front of my wife and my son. And in the end, it just about killed me. But I just went, yeah, I did what the Americans did in Vietnam. I declared victory and I left and just said, that's it, and I walked away. But I must say, all the way to Wollongong, I was just fuming, absolutely fuming with rage, because he desperately needed a smack in the mouth and I was just the man to give it to him. However, no joke, if you find yourself in a, you can half forgive brawling on a football field. I mean, I did it, but really, if you find yourself hitting people or being hit by people in real life, you have lost the plot, because there's no upside. And there's a friend of mine, David Hooks, a very good friend of mine, David Hooks, was hit once and died.
What you did in the car incident was you made a decision, you made a choice. Which was influenced by your sense of responsibility to your family.
Yes, mind you, if I'd had grog on board, I mean, he was so provocative. The truth of it is, if I'd had grog, it may well have got out of hand. But even though I drove to Wollongong fuming, I am endlessly glad, endlessly grateful that I didn't hit him, and I'm even more grateful that he didn't hit me, because he wouldn't have been fighting fair.
Apart from the fact that you wanted to teach him a lesson, do you think that would have taught him a lesson?
No, not at all. I mean, this guy had more fights than I'd had breakfasts, But he was just an arrogant dickhead and deserved a smack in the mouth. And sometimes there was a scene, I don't know if you can splice this, but there was the scene where there are two Stewarts play for Manly. One's Brett Stewart, the fullback, and the other thing is Glenn Stewart, who's a forward. And there was a huge issue last year where he was sent off. He was sent off with another guy, and they were sent off together. A Canterbury guy, I can't remember the name of the guy. It's fascinating because they both sent from the field at the same time for brawling, and these two guys have been brawling and they're sent off together. And they get to the edge of the field and they're right next to each other. And in a quarter of a second, bang, and they're at each other, and the two teams come. And if you put it on slow-mo, neither one nor t'other throws the first punch or the headbutt. It was this spontaneous combustion. It really was, and I've gone through it, spooled through. Who was to blame for that? The answer was the referees or the game that put these two combustible components together at the same time, and it just went bang like that. And one thing I say to my sons is, several things I say, one to my sons and one to my daughters. My mother was very sexually naive. She talks about, before she was, this sounds unbelievable, but when my grandmother got pregnant in 1905, she was so naive, she did not know from where the baby would emerge. Okay, so that was the reign of Queen Victoria, the last gasp of Queen Victoria. In fact, Queen Victoria might have just been dead. But anyway, she was raised in the era of Queen Victoria. They didn't talk about that stuff. Anyway, my grandmother would say to my mother, darling, if anything sexual comes up, just walk away. There's a time for that you'll find out about that. And one thing I say with my sons is, look, parties late on a Saturday night, whatever, if there's confrontation in the air, if there's violence, just walk. You just don't need that shit. Serious things happen, bad things happen, and people do things, and good people do bad things because there's that spontaneous combustion, and it just bursts out. And you need to have that sense of there's danger here. I mean, that case of the young man that was killed in King's Cross. Now, without prejudging who did what to whom when, that was a bad place to be. To be at King's Cross on a Saturday night, and he was a fine young man, and I think that's before the courts now, so we don't know what happened. There's no conviction, whatever. It's difficult to talk about, but there are places where not only as the person who is the victim of danger, victim of fighting, but also there are good people. I imagine if this is going before June, there'll be young men who'll be watching this who know in their hearts they are good young men. But they have made a mistake, and our society is saying, well, you've got to pay for that mistake. Hopefully one of the things to learn is to avoid those situations. If there's danger in the air, if there's violence in the wind, just move away.
You've taught your sons that?
Well, I hope I've taught my sons
I mean,
that.
you've told them that.
My son, I must say, my son did come home on Saturday night with a black eye. Now, so he did. You know, so we talked about what had happened, and he was at a party that was getting out of control, and he was trying to leave, and what he did was, and he made a mistake. He pulled out a camera, thinking, I don't quite know what he was thinking. I think it's maybe that generation, and was recording some of the damage that was being done. But he should never have been at that party. Anyway, he tried to stop a kid who was taking DVDs and throwing them, whatever. But he had the camera, and the kid grabbed the camera, and somebody else came and hit him, etc., etc., etc. So his instinct was, this is not the right place for me to be. Against that, I've also taught my sons, I hope, that if somebody's being bullied or somebody's being put upon, your job, particularly if it's a woman, particularly if it's a female, and that may be quite sexist in the modern age, but I really hope I've taught my sons that whatever happens, you never, ever hit a woman. There is no excuse. I don't care if she's throwing an axe at your head, you don't hit a woman. And ideally, you don't hit a man either. But a man does not hit a woman. A man does not ever hit a female, and there is no excuse, there's no provocation, there's nothing. A man does not hit a woman, a coward hits a woman.
Your family life was pretty happy, I gather. You had a happy family, you had a father who read poetry to you after tomato picking. Tell us about him and what you learned from him.
All of us have the luck of the draw, you know, and you play with the cards you were dealt, and I was dealt, and I make no bones about it, I was dealt 4 aces and a full deck. My mother was a saint. She was just this, you know, my brothers and sisters, we talk about whether our mother was a secular saint. We never saw her or heard her say or do a mean thing. She had this generosity of spirit. She was she was born a wealthy woman to a very wealthy man and mother. And she married a man, my father, who was quite a poor man. Anyway, they raised 7 children. We lived on a farm up at Peats Ridge, and they never fought. They never said a cross word to each other. And my favourite story is that when my mother was dying, she'd been married to Dad for .3, carry 1, subtract 2, 44 years, I think. That's right, yeah, 44 years when Dad died. And she was just about to die, and my sisters just helped her sort of talk, and she said to the loo, and my mum, I think, was on morphine, and said to my sister, is there anything you want to ask me? And my sister Kathy said, yes, Mum, what's the best thing in your life? And she said, sex with your father. Fantastic. And just what a fantastic thing that after 44 years of all the things that life's delivered up to you, that's the best thing. Even though it was the first time my sisters had ever heard the word sex acknowledged to my sisters. My mother had acknowledged to my sisters that sex existed.
What in that sort of environment, that great positive environment, did you ever feel the outside world was a threatening place?
I was bullied. I was very, very badly. Well, look, in fact, I wasn't badly bullied, but I was I was a super, super sensitive kid. So that
perfect for a rugby player.
Yeah. Well, I toughened up later on, but you know, at 7, from the age of 7 to the age of 12, from the age of 0 to the age of 12, I could cry for Australia. I would have cried for Australia. I was just hypersensitive, and when I say I was bullied, I wasn't badly bullied, but I was terrorised by this guy. And in the book that I wrote, I've given him a euphemism. I'll call him Billy. And, you know, he never really hit me or hurt me badly, but it was a psychological form of bullying. And I cried so much. The most seminal moment in my life, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I cried so much about this fellow Billy that my mother took action. And my mother said to my sister, tell Billy to back off. Tell him to leave Pete alone. Anyway, Billy And Billy had a lip that could just around touch his nose when he was scowling. He said, "You've been dobbing on us to your sister." And and your mum's told him to back off, whatever. And I said, no, Billy, no, I'll really get her for that. No, she said, "You're kicked out of our gang for a week." No, you're out. Anyway, so I had a week on my own. And the following Monday, he said, "All right, you can come back." And I had sensed the fresh air of freedom. Once I knew what it was like. So he had a gang. Billy had a gang. Look, the gang was 7 or 8 boys. Smoking behind the boys' toilets is basically what the gang did. But once I knew what it was like not to be part of a gang, to be my own man, to answer to myself, it's I will never ever go back to that. And look, who knows if I could put whatever I am today, good man, bad man, poor man, beggar man, thief, rich man, poor man, tinker, tailor, soldier, sailor, whatever I am inside me, I would trace a lot of it to that moment of never being psychologically dependent on others. I am my own man and I make my own mistakes, but I won't be doing things at the behest of others. And so whenever I've been in, I liked being a part of a football team, but I never liked being a part of a faction within a football team. I never liked, I liked working for the Sydney Morning Herald. I like doing TV stuff, but I don't feel, I don't want to be in a gang. There's something in me. It just says I'm my own man, and that's the end of it.
Now, you're a professed atheist?
Absolutely. I do not believe there is a magic man above the clouds watching us. Bullshit.
How did you form your set of moral codes, if you like? I mean, through your family, perhaps?
Perhaps my father was a Christian man and my mother sort of went along with it best she could without really, getting it in mumbo jumbo. But I suppose, again, I was blessed. I was dealt 4 aces. I saw the way my parents lived. And I talked to my brother about it last night. My brother lives 100 yards down the road. And we were talking about, we both do our bit that we can for the community and charity. But I said to him, let's make no mistake. You know and I know, neither of us are 1/10 what our mother did. My mother did everything for charities and all that. So, and my father, he also was very, very active, and it was just the example that we were set. But when I was about 14 or 15 years old, I read a book called The Best of Bertrand Russell. And the theme, one line that Bertrand Russell said, it was just a great line. He said, look, didn't believe it. He said, why should the Christian God be any more likely than the Greek gods or the Roman gods or the indigenous gods or whatever? He don't think he used indigenous. But the point was, since the dawn of time, mankind's worshipped 10,000 gods. Okay, so the chance that the Christian God's the actual real true one, please. But anyway, Bertrand Russell had this great line. He said, even if this God does exist, is he so vain? Is he so up himself that we need to be going, oh, geez, I'm unworthy. What about you? God, what about you? How good are you? I'm unworthy. I just go, look, come on. And so at 15, that planted a seed in my head that, just changed me. But I didn't. But you don't. It's not that you abandon the moral code and of the Christianity. I can't remember the commandments, but there's the best of them is that do unto others. I'm not sure if this is a commandment or an aphorism, but I think it's a commandment. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, I always say to my Christian friends, and I've got a lot of Christian friends, take that value. Take that value and you can sleep in on a Sunday morning. You don't have to go through the mumbo jumbo. And, as a guide to how to live a life and how to deal with other people and how to interact in everything that's about us, do unto others as you would have them do unto you is a fabulous value. So if you're an employee, well, there's my employer. If I was the employer, if I was the employer and he was the employee, would I want him to work hard? Yes. So that covers working hard. It covers not stealing. It covers not hitting people. It covers embracing your wife. It covers not cheating on your partner. It basically, that value of deal with people the way you would like to be dealt with, I think it's got the whole thing.
Finally, I wonder if you could tell us people that you look up to. Who do you admire and respect and like?
I always say my former football captain, and he's my closest friend, Nick Farr-Jones. I say whatever I know about generosity, half I learnt from my mother, and half I learnt from him, watching the way he deals with the world. Sadly, he's a Christian. I think he may have learned a fair bit of it from Christianity, generosity. But I look at the way he lives, and I just see he's just endlessly giving. He's endlessly generous. So I admire him. I love Bob Dylan. So I listen. I think I've abandoned the Bible, but I do believe there's nothing that happens in the world that the music of Bob Dylan doesn't cover. You know, Reuben can take a man out with just one punch, if you're Hurricane Carter, but he never did like to talk about it all that much. He sits like Buddha in a 6-foot cell, an innocent man in a living hell. Anything that life has to offer, there's Dylan. So I very much admire his works. I'm very good friends with Joe Hockey, and I like the fact that Joe's one of my best friends. I live in his electorate, and I've never voted for him. Probably never will vote for him.
But you like him?
I like him a lot, but that's one of the great things about political, democracy in Australia. I like the line. I never voted for John Howard, but I liked his line that where he said, "The things that unite we Australians are greater than the things that divide us." Now, I mentioned how I was dealt with 4 aces, and not everybody has been dealt with 4 aces. But if you've been born in Australia, you're up there. I tell you what, you're holding a pair of jacks to start with.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I've had a lovely time.
Thanks, Peter.